Settle down, brother. This is the Quarter Report, powered by ENCA.com. South Africa is a movie. Welcome to the watch party. Is President Ramaphosa losing his grip on not just his own party, but the state? We're going to talk about that today because since the last time we spoke to you, a raft, in fact, 3 different extraordinary things happened that should not be happening. The first one is that our chief of the South African National Defense Force took a trip to Iran and made a bunch of public comments that frankly were not military to military discussions. They were foreign policy, political statements that have serious implications for the country. And at a time where South Africa is desperately trying to mend our relationship with the United States of America, and at a time where we are consistently trying to, as a country, deny any of the conspiracy theories that Iran has been funding our affairs and funding our case in the International Court of Justice and the rest. This was an extremely damaging set of statements from, again, the chief in charge of our defense force. But 2 other things happened this weekend. 2 very, very powerful and prominent members of the African National Congress, Senzo Mchunu, who is the principal subject of an investigation through the Madlanga Commission into allegations made of criminality and corruption by General Mkhwanazi in our police services and beyond. He came out this weekend and said that the ANC might be on the verge of collapse. And formerly powerful ANC member and now disgraced state capture linked ANC politician Malusi Gigaba openly criticized the NEC of the ANC and said that they should not have the DA in the government of national unity. The question now is whether or not Gigaba and Mchunu's actions signal that this is starting to happen. The president is losing authority over his own party. This is a really, really important episode of the Quarter Report as we cover this weird moment in Ramaphosa's presidency that at least probably was going to happen regarding the ANC members, but not in terms of this army general. You can watch the full episode on ENCA.com. You can also go to 3beaniesnetwork.com. Both links are in the description. 3beaniesnetwork.com is where you get some excellent merchandise and support our project. Okay, let's start with the very big story. The chief of the South African National Defense Force, SANDF, so literally the head of the military, the most powerful person in our military, General Rudzani Maphwanya, went to Iran last week. Now, some important context. Iran and South Africa have always had fairly friendly relations. South Africa has taken the friend-to-all approach to people and countries all around the world, as we know. But since we took Israel to the International Court of Justice to try and stop them from creating an environment that would cause and perpetuate a genocide, and were we not so right about that? Ever since then, a conspiracy theory has gone around that Iran funded our legal case. Basically, there is no evidence for that whatsoever. It's just some opportunist tried to put like 1 and 1 together and make 3. Because at the time that our ICJ case went before the court, the ANC was quite famously broke. They were about to run out of money. The sheriff, you probably didn't even know we have sheriffs, but yes, the sheriff of, I think, Johannesburg, Pretoria or something, went to Luthuli House at one stage to like go and appraise assets for potential seizing of assets to pay off debts and that. And so at that time, someone tried to take advantage of the ignorance of South Africans and go, well, if the ANC is broke, they can't afford to pay for this ICJ case to all the legal counsel. And so Iran, which is an enemy of Israel, must have funded our ICJ case. That is both fact-free, like that is genuine fact-free milk, like that is an evidenceless claim. There is no evidence that Iran funded our ICJ case. But more painfully obvious than that, the funding for our ICJ case happened through the state, and our government is famously not bankrupt. So that was an act from our Justice Department and DIRCO to advance what we felt like was an important act on the world stage in our foreign policy and our justice capacity. So it is silly, spurious, and stupid. Wow, my language is back. That was pretty good. Silly, spurious, and stupid to say that because the ANC was broke, that therefore Iran funded our ICJ case. But that has worked into a lot of right-wing grifters trying to claim that there's an improper relationship between Iran and South Africa, even though there is, again, no evidence to suggest that that is the case. So however you feel about America or Israel or Palestine or Iran or South Africa, the core is there's no evidence of an improper relationship. The core is that there's no evidence that Iran funded our ICJ case. It's laughable to think that. Unless you provide me evidence, there's no evidence. So General Rudzani Maphwanya went across to Iran last week to do something which is fairly run-of-the-mill. People, like countries, often have military-to-military meetings and engagements. It's fairly common for countries' militaries to talk because they need to be on decent enough terms and kind of sometimes form co-working collaboration relationships sometimes with different countries around the world. All countries do this, from China to Russia to America. They all do this. So General Maphwanya was in Tehran last week in Iran, again, the chief of SANDF. And suddenly, Iranian state media started to report on quotes from Maphwanya that were not military to military. They were foreign policy statements about the relationship between South Africa as a country, not its military, and Iran as a country, not its military. The quotes are, commended their country's common goal of fighting global arrogance and aggressive colonial approaches. Apparently, General Maphwanya hailed Iran's decision to accord South Africa a prioritized position in its foreign policy approach, recalled Iran's historical support for South Africa's anti-apartheid struggle, and stated that the ties had forged a lasting bond between the two nations. So that's News 24's reporting. And he also spoke on South Africa's case at the ICJ that seeks to ensure those responsible for genocide are held accountable. And Maphwanya conveyed greetings from President Ramaphosa and the Defense Minister Angie Motshekga. So, whether you agree with those statements or not, and Maphwanya's positions on these issues or not, it's not his job to say that. That is a foreign policy statement. That is a politician's political statement. It's not about military to military whatsoever. And unsurprisingly, given South Africa is trying to normalize relations with the United States to preserve trade relationships and the benefits for our local economy, try to recover from the tariffs mess, this immediately set off a firestorm. It was reported in BBC World News. It was reported in Al Jazeera, another world news platform. Like, it was clearly and unequivocally politically remarkable that he said that. And the Tehran Times in Iran quoted Maphwanya as saying that his visit carries a political message and comes at the best possible time to express our heartfelt sentiments to the peace-loving people of Iran. Now, again, this is not a chat about your personal position on Israel, Palestine, Iran, America, Russia, the world geopolitics whatsoever. It is a chat about how extraordinary it is for Maphwanya to have said all of these things. It is a chat about how compromising it is to our attempts to conduct our foreign relations. And the presidency immediately came out and said that there would be consequences for the army chief's, quote, ill-advised comments during a recent visit to Iran. So according to EWN's reporting, the presidency said the military chief had the authority to travel to foreign countries and discuss military-related matters. However, Maphwanya's comments in Iran went far beyond that and into foreign policy. And a lot of other political parties have called for Maphwanya to be fired. The DA called for a court-martial, although the presidency spokesperson Vincent Magwenya said that there would be action taken, but, quote, with respect to the DA's calls for a court-martial, it's difficult to speak to. One would have to look at what constitutes the grave nature of charges or accusations that will require a court-martial. And apparently, Ramaphosa will meet with General Maphwanya in the next few weeks to find out from his perspective what happened. So this is damaging, but truly I want you to understand that this is remarkable. For an army chief to go to another country and go so off the permitted script, this would be remarkable in any country in the world. We are not supposed to be hearing quotes about foreign policy, international affairs, and politics from the generals of a military force of a country. It is literally not their field of expertise or place to speak. And I think what it indicates is a fundamental losing of control over the state from the presidency. So I'm not here to, like, don't get me wrong. This isn't like, oh, the army is rogue and there's a coup coming and everything's going to be the worst and there's going to be a terrible military takeover and insurrection and the presidency's not in control of our military forces. There's no evidence of that. But the fact that the army chief would go and do something like this either means the president is losing control and authority over some key members of his government and of the state over which he democratically has been elected to preside, or this army chief has no self-discipline or control and cannot be trusted to do this kind of crucial function of his role as, again, the head of the South African National Defence Force. Either of those situations are bad. Really, really bad. And in both of those situations, I think the argument to remove him from his position is very strong and very clear. The president has not done that yet, and he does move very slowly in general. That might still be coming. But given Andrew Whitfield, the deputy minister for the DA, got fired for taking an unsanctioned trip and for basically performing his duties as a cabinet member inappropriately in the eyes of the president, what is this then? But I think it's incredibly alarming for the presidency and for the ANC to think about the fact that their president of their party, that they only got 40%, but it is the majority, has not got enough control over the leader of our military, such that the leader of our military can go to another country and go that off script in such a clearly damaging way. And now let's turn to the two ANC bigwigs, Senzo Mchunu and formerly a bigger wig, Malusi Gigaba. Senzo Mchunu is, again, one of Ramaphosa's most powerful allies. Again, he is on special leave. Again, he's the subject of many allegations and a formal commission inquiry into his conduct as police minister. Malusi Gigaba, formerly a bigwig in the ANC, formerly Home Affairs Minister, now in disgrace and facing serious allegations of state capture, inappropriate relations with the Guptas. So Malusi Gigaba did an interview with the Sunday Times, and he said that the NEC of the ANC, the top decision-making body, is failing to reach its objectives, and the ANC shouldn't have gone into coalition with the DA. Now, we know that there are members of the ANC within the ANC who believe that, but you don't go and say that in public. You don't break the party line. You don't contradict your president. You don't contradict your entire top leadership of your party and say that they should not have gone into coalition with the Democratic Alliance. And then Senzo Mchunu was at an event in KZN in the last few days, and he said that the party was on the verge of collapse, which again is not something you say as an ANC member, as a member of any party about your own party. You absolutely do not say that. And again, this makes me think about the presidency losing control. This time, the president of the nation, in his role as the president of the ANC, losing control over his own party. It feels like that moment where people are starting to jockey harder and harder for positions over who's going to succeed Ramaphosa and who's going to be part of the team to succeed Ramaphosa. Maybe Mchunu and Gigaba don't think that they could actually mount a challenge to become president of the African National Congress after Ramaphosa, but they can certainly jockey to try and be in the top 6 or the kind of slate of the different main rivals for that position. We know that both Gigaba and Mchunu have had aspirations in the past to be ANC president, so it's not far-fetched. There's always a moment when it tends towards the end of a presidency, the allotted time to be president of South Africa, when an ANC president starts to lose their grip over the party as people fight for their own succession plan. Happened with Mbeki, happened with Zuma, and it might just be about to happen with Ramaphosa, which is interesting because Ramaphosa did such a good job of removing all of his ops from the ANC. He did such a good job. And he and his allies have held such an iron grip over the party for the last few years, but this is now starting to be dodgy. However, big caveat to this. Malusi Gigaba's career is on a hiding to nothing, and he is probably worried about impending criminal investigations into him, and maybe even a trial for alleged state capture. So this might be the flailing of a desperate man who's trying to change the narrative around himself to accumulate power, attract support and allies, and therefore use that as a buttress to defend himself and protect himself, insulate himself from legal consequences for his past actions. And Mchunu may be exactly the same, because he really may now be thinking, and this may be him telling on himself by accident, he may now be thinking this Madlanga commission is going to find something against me, and that's going to be the end of my political career, and I may actually also end up behind bars, I may end up on trial, I may end up in court. So this might be the desperate flailing of two men who see the writing on the wall, legally and career-wise, but particularly for Mchunu, it's an extraordinary thing to do, because Ramaphosa has been your man. You've been Ramaphosa's man for years. And he has been, I think, relying on Ramaphosa to be his man in this Madlanga commission period. Is this him telling on himself that he thinks that the that the Madlanga Commission is going to find against him and he's going to be in big trouble. We wait and see. But it does feel like there is a fraying happening within even the ANC now, as people jockey for position, worry about their futures and their jobs, and try to figure out what their role will be in the future post-Ramaphosa African National Congress. So let us know what you think about all that on the WhatsApp line 0607 613 436. It is really, really starting to be a hectic political time in South Africa, and I know it has been hectic. But nothing is more hectic in this country than an ANC internal succession battle. And nothing has greater consequences for our political future as a country than an ANC internal succession battle and divided factionalism within the African National Congress. Every single major turning point in modern South African history happened because of an internal ANC factional battle. And that is what we are starting to see. Chat tomorrow.